Welcome to the Base Path Podcast, brought to you by New England Baseball Journal. I'm your host, Dan Guttenplan. Today's guest is a familiar guest. I think you've been with us now 2 or 3 times. It's Kevin Graber, the coach of Phillips Andover, back in Andover after being with the Cubs for the last 2 seasons. KG, how's everything?
It's kind of like the Eminem song. Guess who's back?
Yeah, that's right.
Back again.
Should have been our intro.
Right? No, it's great to be back. Thanks. And I think I was one of the first podcast guests that you had back in the day.
I think you were. Yeah, that was, I think we've had you a few times.
Yeah. And we've stayed in touch, man. I've appreciated that. And I couldn't start any conversation or podcast with you without a shout out to you and the New England Baseball Journal for the coverage of local high school baseball, both on the MIA and the prep scene, man. It's just an amazing resource. Without it, there would just be such a hole. So thank you.
Thank you for saying that. Well, let's start with the decision to come back to Andover after being with the Cubs. I know when you were exploring that path, it was kind of always your dream to be at the highest level of baseball and see how far you could take it. What brought you back to Andover?
I was homesick, to be quite honest with you. And it's interesting. Like, I didn't miss the baseball part of it as much because I was getting plenty of baseball and professional baseball. Yeah. What I missed was the simple stuff like academic advising. I missed, running a dorm and living on campus. I missed being around these incredible students. I missed being in the classroom. I missed going to basketball games, pep rallies, chaperoning events on weekends. I missed the community. I have a ton of friends here. And, when it came down to it, my family and I stepped back. We could have kept going with Chicago Cubs professional baseball, but we wanted to evaluate where do we feel the most fulfilled? Where can we do the most good? And we ended up back here. And thankfully, Andover had a spot for me. When I was a kid, move your feet, lose your seat was a real thing. So I had no sense of entitlement about coming back, but thankfully they welcomed us back with open arms.
Yeah, and now you're back in the seat as the head coach of the baseball program. Yeah. While you were there, obviously, you were at the top of the New England rankings every year. How do you get it back to that spot?
Well, it began before I even left the Chicago Cubs. I mean, I got on a Zoom call with returning varsity baseball players a month before I left the Chicago Cubs from my office at the spring training complex in Arizona. And it's just a fun challenge right now. Coach Chris Powers did an amazing job in my absence. I'm so grateful for that. He's going to remain on board as one of my assistant coaches on our staff, and that's going to be wonderful. But we're different. And the main thing I've been doing is reestablishing our culture, with our off-field core values, with our on-field core values, our style of play. Last night we met in one of the conference rooms here in our Office of Admission on campus, and we did a half-hour PowerPoint presentation just on our pitching approach and how we attack hitters and why we had so much success in the program leading up to 2022 with that. So the brainwashing has begun, and it's my goal to make sure they learn as much in the baseball program as they are in any classroom, which says a lot because Andover's no joke when it comes to the academic program.
No, yeah, it's serious. Let's talk about your time with the Cubs, because I know it kind of evolved what your role was and your responsibilities. When you first took it, what were you doing, when you started? I think you were out in Arizona to begin?
Dan, it's quite a story.
Yeah.
So I was hired for a position called complex coordinator,
right?
Which is sort of like assistant head of school at the spring training complex. And along with that, I was to manage the rookie league team that plays out of that spring training complex in Arizona after spring training. Those are the youngest players they have in the organization. I guess I was too good at complex coordinator. And they had never had a complex coordinator before. So part of my challenge was to sort of invent what the job is. And right away, I started establishing relationships with everybody there, with the pitching coordinators, the hitting coordinators, the strength and conditioning coordinators, the chef who prepares all the meals, the head of grounds who's maintaining all the fields, the folks who are selling tickets upstairs, everybody. And, we started having a lot of staff meetings and cool stuff. And I was communicating quite frequently with, front office staff in Chicago. And, it was going really, really well. So a few weeks before spring training, the field coordinator, who was my boss, was elevated to big league hitting coach, a guy named Dustin Kelly. So they moved me from complex coordinator to field coordinator. So if complex coordinator was like the assistant head of school, now I'm like the head of school.
Yeah.
And my responsibility is to run spring training. So I ran minor league spring training my first year with the Cubs. That was 2022. And did a few other things as well. I worked major league spring training also while running minor league spring training. And I was also the organization's base running and base stealing coordinator. So
Wow.
I took on a lot in a short amount of time. Now,
Yeah.
the field coordinator position, once we got through spring training, that's a roving position. And so you travel from Arizona to the different minor league affiliates and back. So Myrtle Beach, low A, South Bend Cubbies, high A, Tennessee Smokies, double A, the Iowa Cubs in triple A. And there's some Dominican travel, and at times there can be some Chicago travel as well.
Hmm.
And while I was roving, specifically teaching guys about base stealing in Tennessee with double A, there was just a sudden vacancy with the manager's position,
Hmm.
unexpected. And I got a phone call, and it was like everybody calls me KG, as you know. And the phone call said, "Hey, KG, you're going to skipper the ship tomorrow in double A." And it was a Sunday game, getaway game, last in a 6-game series. And we won. I got another phone call, said, "Hey, stay with the team and bring them to Birmingham this week." I was like, "Okay." Rescheduled my flight, took them to Birmingham. Then they were like, "Hey, stay with the team and bring them to Huntsville." So I brought them to Huntsville. And then they're like, "Stay with the team through the All-Star break." And I did. And then it was like, "Okay, just stay with the team through the end of the season." And as you know, Dan, we ended up winning the Southern League for the first
Right.
time in 45 years. We broke a 45-year drought in double A. The manager of that club, the last time they won a championship in the Southern League, was Tony La Russa. So a good amount of history attached to that experience. But it was such a great experience. I learned so much. And going from one spring being a high school coach to the next spring managing and winning a championship in double A, it was quite an evolution.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you were back with them this year too, weren't you?
So I went back to field coordinator this year because field coordinator is actually a step up from being a minor league manager.
Okay.
It's a different pay grade. It's a different level of responsibility. The managers and coaches on the minor league side all report to the field coordinator.
Yeah.
And I had talked to them about going back to double A and running it back and trying to repeat, but they were like, "You can always go back to managing. It's really hard to get the field coordinator. Every organization only has one."
Yeah.
And it's a pretty quick path to the big leagues as well. So I took that advice to heart. I went back to field coordinating, went back to roving. So I was on the road after spring training like the entire summer. And it was
Wow.
fun, but as you know, it can be a lot.
For sure. Yeah. And when did you start to get a sense like, hey, maybe I want to go back to Andover?
Well, I signed a 2-year contract, and
Oh,
my
okay.
goal with year 2 was to do better than I did in year 1, because you always want to, be same guy, more experience, put that to good use.
Mhm.
And B, again, I wanted to step back and evaluate. Do we want to keep going with this? And we definitely had the option and opportunity to do that. But where do we feel most fulfilled? Where do we feel like we can do the most good? And I was talking to the Cubs and talking to Phillips, Andover, and some other schools actually. And it just ended up that this just felt like a calling and where we were supposed to be.
Do you think you would have been in New England had you not ended up in Andover?
I was definitely going to be at a school this coming fall.
Yeah. Okay. And in New England, you think, or
Yes.
not necessarily? Oh, okay.
Yes. I had irons in the fire and some options and some offers.
Yeah. Do you think, I mean, obviously you were probably on a path to maybe one day, like you thought, being in the big leagues. Do you think that door is closed now, or do you think it's open if you ever want to go back?
Well, I did feel like at 53 years old when I signed that contract with the Cubs, it felt like a now or never proposition.
Yeah.
I feel like starting off in pro ball, you probably got, if you enter at 53, 54, 55, you probably got like a 10-year window to make it happen for yourself.
Yeah.
And also, we have 3 kids, Katie, Kyle, and Kelly, and they're adults now, 22, 21, and 26 years old. So that was another determining factor of taking that leap and trying professional baseball. We had offers in the past leading up to that one, but our kids were in high school and we didn't want to pull them out. So it was a perfect storm of being the right circumstances and the right timing. I do feel like being back at Andover, although when college jobs come open, my name tends to get thrown around and my phone rings and stuff like that. This feels as much like the big leagues as the actual big leagues does for me. I mean, Andover's the #1 high school in the country. It's the most selected, the most prestigious, has the biggest endowment, has the most amazing kids, the most beautiful campus. And I just, there's not a lot that I would consider a step up from this opportunity here.
Yeah. I know, when we were writing about you leaving for the Cubs, that I think what caught their eye initially was your base running expertise and the way that you coach it. And I think that really kind of has caught on in other organizations and all across baseball. How would you describe that philosophy, and how do you teach it?
So base stealing became my thing, and then it became a thing.
Yeah. Right.
And when I say it became a thing, is what happened was Major League Baseball went to larger bases, which meant shorter baselines.
Yeah.
They went to a pitch clock. They went to the 3 pickoff rule. In other words, if you try to pick off a third time and you don't record an out, that's a balk, and the runner gets the next base. And so Major League Baseball organizations started scrambling. Like, who's out there teaching this new school style of base running? Who's a progressive thinker? Who can help us figure this out? Because most organizations were just, talking about it one day during spring training, and the guys were on their own to get jumps. So yeah, I was, I had presented on the main stage at the 2022 American Baseball Coaches Association National Convention, coincidentally in Chicago. And I talked, I presented with, a ton of video for 50 minutes about, this new school style of momentum steals. I had some influences in that regard. Mike Roberts from the Cape Cod League is like the forefather of this, and I became obsessed with his teachings, and he became a mentor. But I kind of took it and ran with it and added my own spin to it, my own drill progressions and things like that. So that was the initial interest from the Chicago Cubs and some other organizations. But the Cubs were the one organization that said, wow, we think in addition to that, you can do other things, which is why they hired me as a coordinator in addition to that responsibility. But yeah, basically it's putting freedom in the hands of the players without getting a sign from the coach to steal bases when 4 things fall into place. Number 1 is technique, which has to be perfect. And then timing, distance, and anticipation. Timing means you're off before leg lift, before the pitcher lifts his leg. Distance means if I can get out to a certain distance before that pitch comes out of his hand, it's impossible to throw us out. Excuse me. And anticipation means I got to pay attention to patterns, and I got to have a good idea of what he's going to do before he does it.
Right.
And it's not something you can teach like one day and the guys get it. It's like a plant. You got to constantly water it. So drill during spring training and visit the minor league affiliates throughout the year and just make sure it's continually watered. Excuse me.
Oh, no problem. And now I know you had coached Matt Shaw, I think.
Matt Shaw is my guy.
Yeah. What was that like to kind of reunite with a New England guy?
I just traded text with Matt Shaw yesterday because he was named Southern League MVP this past year in AA. Even though he spent almost as much time in AAA as he did in AA.
Yeah.
And a funny story, when I was managing in AA, Matt had just been drafted, and he ascended quickly. The low A, high A was killing it. All of a sudden, we're together in AA with like 2 weeks to go in the regular season, and of course, we won a championship.
Right.
So that was great. And the funny thing is, Dan, I knew Matt Shaw as a soccer player, because our son Kyle played high school soccer at Pomfret School in Connecticut, and Matt Shaw was an amazing soccer player at Worcester Academy. Right. And so I had seen Matt Shaw and my son matched up together on the soccer field because Matt was a defender and my son was a forward. And I didn't really know Matt as a baseball player because the 2 years that he played for Worcester Academy were the COVID years. So one year we didn't even have a season, and the other season we played like 12 games. I don't know if we even played Worcester. So I didn't really even know Matt Shaw. But I was really partial in keeping an eye out for the New England guys, not only in our organization, but when other teams would come to us in the Southern League in AA, I would look on the roster to see who was from New England and venture over there and say hello and, shoot the breeze and stuff like that. But Matt Shaw, man, he is a hit machine. Like that guy, I tell him all the time, he could wake up out of a coma hitting line drives. Like I'm telling you. But the fun thing was Matt, after he was drafted, he and his fiance bought a home in Arizona so they could be near our spring training complex. So every day this past off season, after the actual season, during the winter in Arizona, he and I worked together on defense for like an hour and a half, 2 hours every day.
Wow.
So he and I got to be really, really close. And I was proud to play a role in a kid's progression in professional baseball, who I know is a surefire, not only major leaguer, but major league all-star.
Yeah. You have a lot of guys that you coached at Phillips Andover who are kind of matriculating through minor league systems. One of them, Thomas White, was a first-round pick a couple of years ago, and he's also had a really good year. What have you kind of seen from him from afar that he's developed here at the minor league level?
Thomas White might be my favorite human being of all time, him and his family. Yes, he's the best. He and I spent so much time together during his time at Andover. Because again, I live on campus. I'm an academic advisor here. I'm a classroom teacher. I work in the office of admission. I'm here 24/7. Yeah. And I was Thomas's academic advisor, so I was with him through his academic trajectory here as well. Yeah. And it is no surprise to me that he is kicking as much butt as he is in professional baseball, because he was definitely ready for it. And he was definitely mature enough for it. And one of the things is, we're a boarding school. 80% of our students here live on campus with the faculty. Yeah. And he was so accustomed to managing his time, being away from home, living where he works. work ethic off the charts. There is not 1 ounce of procrastination in Thomas White. He was the kid, he got a homework assignment. Immediately, he's hammering it. And then he's at the weight room, and then he's on the field long tossing. And, he's going to bed when he should be, and he's doing fun stuff as well. So he's, decompressing when it's not time to do work. And he brought all that with him to Pro Bowl.
Yeah.
Plus, I mean, he is blessed by the baseball gods to be a guy who throws 98 with very little effort.
Yeah.
And, with a slider, slurvy, breaking pitch that he throws for a strike wherever he wants, feel for the changeup. I mean, it's just been so fun watching his success and his trajectory. Number 1 prospect in the Marlins organization.
Yeah, it's amazing. And Jonathan Santucci, another one of your guys, was a really high pick this past year. What do you think his professional career will look like?
Jonathan's a unicorn. I mean, there aren't many two-way players in college, and he was a two-way player at Duke University, and a legitimate one at that.
Yeah.
He had an arm injury, and that's when he scaled back a little bit and said, okay, I'm going to put my eggs in the pitching basket. And he could have been a top 10 pick this past season, but he got a little bit of a, arm issue going on. Dropped. I shouldn't say dropped. He was like one of the first picks of the second round.
Right.
You can't go wrong with that.
No.
Got a healthy signing bonus. And, he did not report to, their spring training facility or go to one of their affiliates right away. He's still rehabbing a little bit of an arm issue. So he'll be ready to rock and roll when New York Mets spring training fires up next spring. One cool connection there is our major league bench coach with the Chicago Cubs my first year was a guy named Andy Green. And Andy and I are really, really close friends. He became a great mentor for me. And now he's the farm director for the New York Mets. So when they drafted Jonathan Santucci, I had talked to the Mets before they drafted him, but I also gave Greeny a call and said, hey, you got one of my guys coming. Just make sure you give him a special VIP hello and tell him I was asking about him. So I love to be able to do that kind of thing for our players. And so really excited for Jonathan Santucci. And the other one is Jack Penny, right, Dan?
Yeah. He just got drafted last year, didn't he?
He was drafted in the 5th round by the Detroit Tigers.
Yeah.
And he had an incredible run after being drafted because he reported to their spring training facility in Lakeland, Florida. And then he got to go to Low A. And Low A, they won their division and made it to the playoffs. Oh. And in the deciding game in the playoffs, he had 2 home runs. So,
wow.
It's off to a great start for Jack Penny. And the thing about Jack is he's an infielder, but he can play anywhere. He can play shortstop, third base, second base, played both shortstop and third base at Notre Dame. At the major Division I level, and you hit the ball anywhere near Jack Penny and you're out. I mean, you can't say much more than that about a defender. He just makes every play, and that's going to serve him really, really well in professional baseball. Like those guys stick around for a long time.
Yeah, I saw him for the first time. He was at like an area code games tryout type of thing back in 2020 during the pandemic, and I saw him. Really liked him. He was he was just, he'd make good contact every time he got up to the plate. He made a couple good defensive plays. I thought he was going to be a player.
I call him the human instructional video because everything he does is so fundamental. He's always 10 toes on the ground, perfect 4-seam throws across the diamond, connected swings inside the ball, big part of the field, gets bunts down, steals bases. He just does everything well. Yeah,
he does. So since you've been away from Andover, a lot has changed in the game of baseball, whether it be, the NIL money now or the transfer portal being used so much at the college level as a forum for recruiting. What is your take on kind of the state of the game right now and what you're coming back to at the prep level?
Hey, Dan, we lost each other for a sec, I think.
Oh, did you hear that or no?
No, I was out and now I'm back in.
Okay. Yeah, wanted to ask you about the state of the game. Since you've left Andover, a lot has changed, with college recruiting. There's the NIL money now. A lot of the college coaches are recruiting through the transfer portal and not so much at the high school and prep levels. What are your thoughts on the state of the game and how will you adjust now, with your return to Andover?
It's concerning, to be honest with you. I mean, I think the transfer portal has provided opportunities for a lot of baseball playing kids that they otherwise wouldn't have access to. And some of our former players have taken advantage of them. I mean, Jackson Emus was one of our guys who played, at Princeton and then did a grad year at Duke University. Andrew Chufo played at Georgetown. He's got another year at Clemson coming up this year. He's the starting shortstop there. Sebastian Mexico was at Fordham. Now he's at Louisiana Tech. Mm-hmm. And I have helped these guys navigate the transfer portal because I kind of know everybody and everybody knows me. So if you're looking to transfer somewhere and you played for me, my phone's going to ring and they're going to ask me about you.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. But I feel for the high school kids for whom this is just becoming a really difficult landscape to navigate. Because as you know, it used to be, all right, I play high school baseball. Maybe I do a postgraduate year and guys graduate college and new spaces open up, but those spaces just aren't opening right now. The way I describe it, Dan, is the dominoes used to fall from high school into college baseball and then out of college baseball to pro ball or just real life. Now all the dominoes are falling from both directions into college baseball, not only from high school, but also from the transfer portal. Plus guys have more years of eligibility. So those dominoes aren't falling out of the game either. So there's just like such a glut right now, plus the COVID years that we navigated. I mean, I don't know what the answer is. I understand that this is what we're navigating right now, and it seems like we're headed even more so in this direction. So I'm still trying to figure out how to process it all and work with college coaches and work with younger kids to make it good for everybody.
Yeah. I know in your previous stint, you've been on the Cape, done some coaching on the Cape. You've done some scout work. What else do you have going on?
Dan, what haven't I done? Where haven't I been?
That's what I was going to ask. Are you planning to return to the Cape or, any of those outside jobs?
Someone was telling me they think that maybe I have won championships at more levels of baseball than any coach in the history of baseball.
Yeah, you were at Bourne when they won a couple of years ago, right?
So Cape Cod League, other college summer leagues, professional baseball, high school baseball, obviously. I won a state championship coaching Amherst Mickey Mantle when I was coaching at Amherst College, 16U.
Yeah.
I've won some of these fictitious, travel ball World Series as well with the New England Roughnecks. Yeah. I don't know what you got. Has anybody else won at more levels than me? I don't know.
Yeah. Are you going back to the Roughnecks?
I will definitely be coaching this summer somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I've had some opportunities with the college summer leagues as well.
Yeah.
Those are interesting because it'd be fun to go back and try and win a championship at that level. But that's quite a commitment. My job here at Phillips Academy is actually a 12-month position. So I'm Senior Associate Director of Admission and Financial Aid, which is such a long title, it barely fits on a business card. Yeah. But we're open in the summer because the summer is when a lot of people, that's when they're free to come and visit schools like ours and have their admissions interviews and tour campus and things like that. So I'm actually here. So anything I do baseball related, I'm packing up after my work day here, getting in a car and running somewhere to do something. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So a little more time consuming than what you left. That makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. Well, KG, do you have time for a 3 up, 3 down segment with our producer, David Yaz?
There's nothing I won't drop and discuss baseball for.
Nice. Oh, well, that's what this is all about.
Get as much as my time as you want.
Great.
We like team players on this podcast, so
that's right, yes.
Coach. Let's do it.
3 up, 3 down.
3 up, 3 down is the segment where we toss out 3 questions to these unprepared panelists and see what they think about the great sport of baseball.
I'm prepared though. Yes, I've been doing dynamic stretching. I've been doing high knees, butt kicks. I'm ready.
Well, let's put you to the test. Let's see. First question is right up your alley, Coach, because it's on the subject of stealing bases. And if you'll bear with me here, I'm going to tell you a little story about a player named Ricky Henderson, who you've probably heard of. We all have. I was looking at his stats recently, and of course they're impressive. He's obviously a Hall of Famer. He's a treat. He was a character, also a fun player to watch. When he second year in the league, first full year with the majors, he stole 100 bases. That opened everybody's eyes. Now, he was caught 26 times. I noticed that in 1981, his second year, he did not play as many games. I'm guessing he was dealing with an injury. He still stole 56 bases, but he got caught 22 times. So that's almost being caught half as much as the steals. Then his record-setting year came the following year in 1982. People remember he broke Maury Will's record. He had 130 steals. He was caught 42 times. And, in fact, if I'm not mistaken, the day before he broke the record, he actually broke the record for being caught stealing in a season. So this is a long-winded way of saying, how do you know when it's worth it for a player to have the green light? I think we'd agree that Ricky Henderson's thing was stealing bases. No one would ever tell him not to steal, but at some point it becomes counterproductive, right? Just tell us your thoughts on that, Coach.
So everything's about run value, right? And so if you're generating more runs than you're denying your team, then it is valuable for you to steal bases at that high rate. But what you just alluded to with the number of times he was thrown out stealing was my exact motivation for what I teach right now. Because the idea is, again, if you have 4 things fall into place: technique, timing, distance, and anticipation, it's really, really difficult to get thrown out. So what I'm trying to do is like game the system, like enter the casino, understanding the cheat code. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's important because in professional baseball, it was stressful for me because I was tracking every steal attempt by every player in our organization, major and minor leagues, and overseas in the Dominican Republic. And so whenever someone would get thrown out, like my heart would skip 2 beats because my livelihood is depending on how these kids are stealing bases. And that's why it was important for me to try to teach this as broadly as I could in the organization, make sure all minor league managers knew it, make sure all of our coordinators, all of our assistant coaches, for the first time we had a designated base running coordinator, each of our minor league kids who are, doing advanced scouting and watching their steal attempts with these guys on video. So yeah, hearing how many times Ricky Henderson was caught stealing gives me a little bit of anxiety, because if that was happening when I was in charge with the Cubs, I mean, that wouldn't have gone well for me.
Could you have coached Ricky up to be a better base stealer?
I think Ricky pretty much had the green light to do whatever Ricky wanted. And that was my best, like speaking in the third person Ricky Henderson voice, because that's what he was so famous for. But here's the thing, like Ricky stole on first movement, just explosive steal breaks. And at stealing third base, it's really, really difficult to do that because it's such a short throw from the catcher. So especially stealing third base, it's really, if you're going to steal third base, it should be with momentum, and it should be before leg lick, and it should be based on timing, distance, and anticipation. And so, Ricky had a superpower. He could get from 0 to 60 in, 0.02 seconds or whatever it was. But not everybody's built like Ricky Henderson, that's for sure.
We appreciate the Ricky speak. When Ricky Henderson sings "Take Me Out to the Ball Game," he says, "Take Ricky out to the ball game. Take Ricky out for some fun." Dan, your thoughts on when a player should be stealing and maybe when he shouldn't?
Yeah, I think it's evolved probably since Ricky Henderson's career. I remember like the 2003-4 Red Sox, were big on, working the pitchers, working the counts, not stealing bases, leaving guys on base, and then, waiting for a home run from Ortiz or Manny. And the value of a stolen base kind of plummeted during that era. Ricky definitely had that technique, though. He was so good at just the minute, he was breaking, he was up to top speed, like KG said. Yeah, I think the ratio should probably be like 4-1 stolen base to caught stealing, somewhere along those lines, if it's going to be worthwhile to do it. I think Ricky Henderson probably had it in his head that he either wanted to get to 100 stolen bases on the year, or he wanted to break the record. So I think that was probably a motivation for him. He was a little bit more individual minded, but yeah, I would say maybe 4-1 is probably a good ratio on stolen bases to caught stealing.
Two things I would add. Number one is our benchmark with Chicago Cubs was 83% success rate.
Okay.
We were up to 90% in AA this year for a time, and that was like unbelievable.
Wow.
I was really, really happy with that. The other thing is, like, I rub some people the wrong way in professional baseball. And that is because I'm really progressive about this kind of thing, which is why they hired me. But there are old school, grizzled dudes who have been coaching and managing in pro ball for decades. And, that's not how I did it when I played, or why would we do that? And, they don't really want to get into the more progressive stuff. And I'll give you an example. Conventional wisdom versus a more progressive stance. And I'm the more progressive. Conventional wisdom is, why would we steal third base with 2 outs? Because they're going to score from second base on contact anyway. Or why would we steal third base with no outs when we can just hit a ground ball to the right side and they're going to advance? They're going to be at third base with less than 2 outs. They could score on a ground out or a fly out. To which my answer is always, if they give it to us, we take it. I don't care how many outs there are. I don't care what the count is. I don't care what kind of pitch there is. I don't care what the score is. If they give something to me, I'm taking it. And, that was counter to a lot of folks that, stick to conventional wisdom. So I had to, and I only have one mode, and it's that, and you can't talk me out of it. So that was a little bit tough for me at times.
Throwing some freakonomics at us. I remember the first time I heard the notion challenged of when we used to have no DH in the NL, that when the pitcher came up, when the number 8 hitter came up with 2 outs, you would walk the eight hole hitter to get to the pitcher. But it turns out if you do the math, it doesn't necessarily work that way because there's a big advantage in the pitcher leading off the next inning.
Right.
Anyway, I love that kind of thinking. So well done,
Well,
Coach.
the other thing was challenging for the old school guys was to run the base stealing system that I teach. You have to green light the players. You can't do it on a sign from the third base coach or from the manager, because the third base coach or the manager doesn't know in real time if timing, distance, and anticipation are going to fall into place. Only the runner knows. And so that was a sticking point for some as well. They sort of lost control of a part of the game that they, weren't accustomed not having control over.
You can't steal if I don't tell them it's okay. All right. Question number 2, Dan, you can take this one first.
Okay.
In my lifetime anyway, and we know I'm an older man than you, Dan, there have always been wooden bats employed in Major League Baseball and aluminum bats employed pretty much everywhere else, except the beloved Cape Cod League, of course, which still has the wooden bats. Your thoughts, Dan, on will that ever change in the future? Is this the way it should be? Will we ever see aluminum bats in the pros?
No, I don't think so. I think it's a safety thing. They're worried about these balls coming off at 110 miles an hour and, off wooden bats. So who knows what they'd be coming off with aluminum. So I don't think it'll change. I do think you start to see more wooden bat, like summer leagues and, even at the college level. So maybe they'll start to incorporate more wooden bats into, AAU type stuff, travel ball, to prepare guys who are pro prospects, but I don't think you'll see aluminum at the professional level.
Yeah, I'll ask you the obvious question, Dan. Do you prefer the crack of a wooden bat or the crack of an aluminum bat?
Wooden bat.
Of course. Yeah. Coach, your thoughts on aluminum versus wood?
A lot of wood being used out there nowadays.
Right?
A lot in the travel ball circuit, wood bat tournaments and stuff like that. Interestingly for us, we have Poly Prep from New York City on our schedule this year. We used to play them. Now they're back on because they're a really strong program. We enjoy going down there and playing them, but they play New York City uses wooden bats, which I really like. So I don't know. I'd be in favor and all on board if everybody went to wood, to be honest with you.
Well,
that would be a happy day.
Yeah, it would be.
Last question number 3, and Coach, you can take this one first. Major League Baseball, of course, has a schedule of 162 games. You just came off a season where you were there for all 162.
True.
And the question's always loomed in my mind. Do we really need 162 games to decide what the best team is? And there's been debate about this, but every time it's snowing in April and we're trying to get a baseball game in, the question pops up. Will that change ever, Coach? What do you think?
I have a strong opinion about this. And it is that professional baseball is about player development. Professional baseball players are seen in terms of value. And everything you do is about developing them so that their value can increase. Okay. 162 games at the big league level and 142 or 144 or 45, but they play at the minor league level is not conducive to player development.
How so?
It is a grind. It induces burnout. These guys are exhausted, especially at the minor league level. Here's the thing. Like, you're not just playing games. Like, if you play a 7:00 game, as a player, you're at the ballpark 1 p.m. at the latest, and you have early work, which would be, individual defensive stuff. You'll have team defense. The pitchers are doing their thing, throwing bullpens, long tossing, flat grounds. There's strength and conditioning every day that happens with these guys. There's meetings, hitters meetings, pitchers meetings, defense meetings. There's on-field batting practice. Then there's early hitting again right before the game starts off, just so you can feel your barrel. And it is 6-game series, without a day off. Mondays are your only day off. And on Mondays, very often, you're on a bus for 8, 9, 10 hours. Obviously, when you travel on the road, half your season is on the road. You're in hotels. You're not in your own bed. Not that you're in your own bed when you're playing at home either. But it is just like, it's almost like survival of the fittest. Playing that many games with that little time off and that few days off. In my mind, that's not what is best for player development.
Is there any cry for this other than your personal, very persuasive case? Will there come a day, or are we stuck with 162 forever?
At the minor league level, I think that the farm directors and the folks that work in player development, it's getting more and more progressive. There's more people coming to that space from other realms, not just, sort of dudes who played professional baseball and then segued into coaching and front office positions. There are different voices in the mix now than more so than ever before. And this is a commonly held thought in the player development space, but everybody's just kind of like, no, there's really nothing we can do about it. So I don't know. I suspect that as that continues to be a topic that's discussed by more and more progressive people that enter professional baseball, I think there's going to be momentum behind that.
Dan, your thoughts? 162 too much, or do you relish every one of them?
Well, I'm going to defer to KG on this one because he's been through it, been through the grind, so I'll take his word for it that it's too much. But one of the things I used to love about baseball was just, these historic numbers, the 61 home runs and the, 406 batting average and stuff that was all kind of centered around that 162 game season. Maybe if there was one good thing to come out of the steroid era, it's that, those numbers became less important because now it's 73 home runs, but everybody kind of puts an asterisk next to that. So maybe there is an appetite for kind of shortening the season and, because those records aren't as much of a big part of the baseball lore anymore. So I'm going to defer to KG and say, let's shorten the season.
Well, Dan and Yaz, I think this extends to how I view high school baseball as well. And what I mean by that is one of the great things about baseball is it is a summer game.
Yeah.
You play the heck out of it in the summer as much as you can. And then, of course, at the high school level, it's a spring sport. So when it's baseball season, no holds barred. Let's get out there and play baseball. But I firmly believe that because you play baseball so much in the summer and you play so much in the spring, it frees you up potentially to do other things in the fall and winter. I believe that playing other sports is good for kids. I think it's fun. I think it makes them a better athlete. And I think being a better athlete makes you better at baseball. If it wasn't a summer game, I'd probably feel differently about it. But we play so much in the summer and so much during high school. It should free you up to do other things in fall and winter. And because of that, here at Phillips Academy Andover, we do not do quote unquote fall ball. We do have a year-long player development trajectory that kids follow. And there is player development happening, but never to the extent that it would prevent a kid from running cross country in the fall or playing football in the fall or learning how to play squash or doing one of the other million things that you can do here they can't do in any other school. I want these kids out there taking advantage of the stuff they'd never be able to do unless they were able to do it here. Jack Penny, for instance, who played at Notre Dame and was drafted and signed with the Detroit Tigers. The Detroit Free Press did an article on, basically it was, who's this guy we just drafted in the 5th round, Jack Penny. And it's telling about Jack Penny, how he went to this really rigorous high school that was super selective. And there were 3 paragraphs dedicated to how he played squash in high school. and I just love it. So yes, our guys are on a fall long toss program right now. You'll see them on our field in small groups of 3 and 4, hitting our cage, turning double plays. I do small independent group work with our guys as well. They're in the weight room, in the fitness center, doing their strength and conditioning stuff, but never to the point where it inhibits them from doing something else in the fall and winter term. I want these guys doing other things and playing other sports. And Dan and Yaz, you might think that I'd be the opposite because there's no more of a baseball person than me. You'd think I'd want these guys playing baseball 365 days a year. And that's the opposite of it. And I want these kids to be well-rounded. I want them to have fun. I don't want them to get burned out. I don't want them to have usage injuries. And so that's really, really important to me.
I went to Milton Academy, so I knew plenty of dudes that played squash, and so it doesn't surprise me. But there are other parts of New England where people might be saying, what the hell is squash? It's kind of a fun sport. Check it out. Well done to both of you on 3 Up, 3 Down. I'm going to see what I can do to get you both Ricky Henderson bobblehead doll before the year's out. I'll work on it. Nice job, and back to you, Dan, to wrap things up.
Okay. I need a Dan Guttenplan bobblehead.
There you go. Yeah.
I want one of those.
All right. Well, thanks to Phillips Andover coach Kevin Graber for joining the Base Path podcast. Subscribe to the New England Baseball Journal at baseballjournal.com. Subscribe, follow the Base Path podcast on your preferred platform. Thanks to our producer, David Yaz. The Base Path podcast is a Siemens Media production.